My parents pressured me to babysit my nephew for free every weekend, so I moved out and let them deal with the chaos they created. I'm a 27-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the responsible one in my family. Growing up, I was always the kid who cleaned my room without being asked, helped my parents with the bills, and made sure my little sister Lily didn't get away with breaking any rules. Now, years later, not much has changed. I work a full-time job at a marketing firm. Come home to help my parents with whatever they need, from paying utilities online to picking up groceries, and somehow, I've ended up being the household's invisible glue. On the other hand, is 30, married, and has a one. My parents dote on her. Every time she posts pictures of her baby on social media, my mother gushes, "Look at how responsible she is. She's doing so well," while my father reminds me, "You're doing great too." But Lily's really in the thick of motherhood now. What that really means is that Lily can barely handle her own life without calling for help. But because she's married and has a kid, she gets endless praise while I get subtle reminders to step up. Weekends are usually filled with errands and chores. I didn't exactly sign up for the laundry, the grocery runs, fixing something broken around the house, but I do it anyway. It's almost automatic. I feel a strange mixture of pride and exhaustion. A tension I can't really voice without being accused of being ungrateful. I've tried to express that I have my own life outside the house, but the message seems to fall on deaf ears. Sometimes I catch myself thinking, one day, maybe all this effort will be recognized. Maybe they'll see how much I sacrifice, how much I actually keep the house, and in a way, the family together. But as I watch Lily post another photo of her baby with a caption like, "Daddy and I had a lovely morning thanks to your help, big bro," I can't help but feel the quiet frustration creeping in. I still hope it matters. I still hope my loyalty will be appreciated. But a small voice in my head whispers that maybe hope alone isn't enough. At first, the babysitting started as just a few hours here and there. Lily would text, "Hey, can you watch him for a couple of hours while we run errands?" And I'd say yes, because how could I refuse? It felt like a small favor. But over time, a couple of hours somehow stretched into entire weekends. Saturday mornings, I'd wake up to a text, "Hey, we're leaving early. Don't forget your little weekend duty." And just like that, my plans, my freedom, my rare moments to relax or hang out with friends evaporated. I'd tell myself, it's family. I can handle this. I'd feed him, change him, calm his tantrums, and spend hours pacing the living room to stop him from climbing onto the coffee table for the 5th time. My parents rarely noticed the exhaustion etched into my face. Instead, they'd say things like, "You're doing such a good job. Lily would be lost without you," which sounded like praise, but really felt like another chain around my shoulders. And then came the guilt trips. If I hesitated, even slightly, my mom would say, "He's family. We count on each other." Or my dad would sigh and remind me that Lily's a mother now, as if that automatically absolved her of responsibility. And I would cave every single time, even though part of me screamed that I deserved a break. That I had a life outside their house too, worse. Every weekend I spent trapped in a cycle of chores and childcare. Lily and her husband would post pictures online of their weekend freedom. I'd scroll past smiling. Sometimes I'd mutter under my breath, "They have no idea how much work this is." Or maybe they do, and they just don't care. By Sunday evenings, I was a mix of drained and resentful, staring at the clock, waiting for the tiny moment of relief when Lily would return. And even though I wanted to scream, I told myself again, it's for the family. I'm helping. I'll be appreciated someday. But the nagging thought that maybe I was just invisible kept creeping in. It didn't take long before the guilt trips turned into emotional pressure I couldn't shake. "You're single? You have free time?" my mom would say, tilting her head with that pleading look, as if my very existence was meant to serve Lily. And my dad would add, "She deserves a break. You understand that, right?" It was subtle at first, almost invisible, but over time it started to feel like a weight pressing on my chest. I wanted to argue, to say I had plans, that my weekends weren't just an extension of Lily's schedule. But the words stuck in my throat most mornings. I'd wake up to the baby already crawling toward danger, the cries echoing through the apartment, and a text from Lily saying, "Don't forget to feed him before his nap. Thanks so much." I'd get him settled, make breakfast, clean up, and then tackle laundry or dishes. All while glancing at my phone, wondering if anyone would notice I hadn't slept well in days. It wasn't just exhaustion, it was the sinking feeling that my life had been put on hold indefinitely, all while everyone else got to live freely. And then there were the small, piercing moments that cut deeper than any argument. I overheard Lily on a call with a friend, laughing about how he's basically our free nanny now, isn't he? My stomach twisted, and for the first time, I realized it wasn't just my parents enabling her. She saw me as a permanent servant. I wanted to feel angry, but all I felt was numb. One evening, I tried to push back, saying, "I have plans this weekend. I can't watch him." My mom's eyes welled up immediately, and my dad's voice turned low, disappointed. "We thought you were different. You used to care more about the family." And just like that, the guilt swallowed me again. By the time I went to bed that night, rocking the baby to sleep in my arms, I realized something terrifying. No matter how much I sacrificed, no one was going to see me. No one would ever acknowledge how much I gave. And yet, deep down, I couldn't stop myself from hoping that maybe tomorrow someone would. It started to feel like the walls themselves were closing in on me. The baby had grown more restless, his shrill cries echoing through the apartment like a warning. And no matter how many toys I scattered across the floor, nothing held his attention for more than 5 minutes. I'd pace from the living room to the kitchen, trying to soothe him, while my mind raced with a cocktail of exhaustion, frustration, and resentment. Every spilled snack, every thrown sippy cup, felt like a personal indictment, as if somehow it was my failure he was expressing. Lily's husband would drop by occasionally, just to check in, and he'd flash me a casual smile. "Thanks, man. Really appreciate it." It sounded polite enough, but it was hollow, detached. Meanwhile, Lily was out with friends, or at a brunch she'd invited me to ignore, because I had to be there for her baby. I kept replaying her social media posts in my head, her laughing at some cafe, her baby perfectly clean, her life perfectly curated, and the bitterness started to eat away at me. Even my parents weren't helping. My mom would hover in the background, sighing heavily when I showed signs of fatigue, then muttering, "He's doing so much for the family." Maybe we're expecting too much. Only no one ever asked if I wanted a break. No one seemed to notice the gray in my hair or the tightness in my shoulders. It was like being invisible, except invisible people were still expected to bend over backward. One afternoon, after a particularly chaotic morning of spilled cereal, diaper blowouts, and tears, both his and mine, I finally snapped. I yelled at the baby, my voice sharp and foreign, and he started crying harder. The apartment smelled faintly of burnt toast, mixed with baby powder and frustration. I sank to the floor, holding him against my chest, feeling utterly defeated, as if I had failed at the one thing I was forced to do, and then, just as the sobs started to fade, I heard Lily's voice on the phone outside the apartment. "I don't know how he does it every weekend. He's basically a saint for us." The words should have comforted me, but instead, they drove the knife deeper. Because I realized I wasn't a saint, I was a backup plan, a free solution to a problem that no one else wanted to face. That night, I couldn't take it anymore. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the pile of dishes, the baby finally asleep in his crib, and my thoughts spiraling into anger I could barely contain. I decided I had to confront them, Lily and my parents, about how unfair everything had become. Maybe if I said it out loud, they'd understand. Maybe during dinner, I tried to keep my voice steady. "I can't keep doing this every weekend," I said, placing my fork down with deliberate force. "I have my own life, my own work, and I'm exhausted. I need some time for myself." My parents froze, forks halfway to their mouths. My mom's eyes narrowed, and my dad's lips pressed together like they were bracing for an attack. Lily, of course, didn't even flinch. She sipped her water and muttered, "You don't understand how hard motherhood is. We all make sacrifices." I wanted to scream. "I'm making sacrifices too. I work full-time, I help with the bills, I'm always here when you need me, and I never ask for anything in return." But my voice cracked, and I swallowed the last word, realizing it was already too late. My parents exchanged that familiar look, the one that said, "He's ungrateful, and we're disappointed." My mom's voice trembled, a mixture of guilt and manipulation. "We're just trying to help, honey. Lily needs support. You're such a good son, that's why we rely on you." My dad added, "You've always been the responsible one. We thought you'd understand." And just like that, The argument I hoped would change everything turned into another reminder. Nothing I said would matter. I felt the familiar knot of hopelessness settle in my chest, heavier than ever before. For the first time, I realized that no amount of pleading, explaining, or sacrificing would make them see me. I was trapped, not by obligation, but by their expectations. Invisible chains made of guilt and duty. That night, as I washed the dishes in silence, I made a quiet promise to myself. Something had to change. I couldn't go on like this forever. But I had no idea how far I would need to go to finally be free. That weekend started like any other, or so I thought. I woke up Saturday morning to a flood of texts from Lily. "Hey, we're leaving early. You know the drill. Don't forget to watch him." I groaned, already feeling the weight in my shoulders. But I reminded myself, just another weekend. You can handle this. Little did I know, this one would change everything. By late morning, Lily still hadn't returned. Her texts became vague, stuck in traffic. "Won't be long." Hours passed. I tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. Panic started to gnaw at me, not just for the baby, but for the fact that I was now solely responsible without any warning. By the time the afternoon rolled around, I was running on fumes, barely able to focus on calming him down while juggling his meals, nap schedule, and the never-ending toys scattered across the floor. And then came the kicker. I got a call from my manager. "We need you in for an urgent meeting." "Where are you?" I explained, voice shaking, that I was stuck babysitting unexpectedly, and immediately felt the sting of their disappointment. "You can't keep letting this happen," they said. I hung up, feeling trapped, the walls of my life closing in faster than ever. When I finally managed to reach Lily, she sounded casual, almost amused. "Relax, your family, you'll manage. I just needed a weekend off. Don't worry about it." The words felt like a slap. My chest tightened, my hands shook, and for the first time, the realization hit me. I wasn't helping out of love anymore. I was being exploited. That night, after the baby finally slept, I sat on the floor in the dark, exhausted, angry, and humiliated. The apartment smelled faintly of spilled milk and toys, reminders of the chaos I'd endured alone. And for the first time, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to endure anymore. I couldn't undo the weekends I'd already sacrificed, but I could take control of what happened next. Something had to give, and this time, it wouldn't be me bending to their demands. That night, I started thinking seriously about leaving. Not just leaving the room or the weekend babysitting duties, but leaving the house altogether. For years, I'd told myself I couldn't, that family comes first, that sacrifices are expected, that I'd be letting everyone down if I put myself first. But after the last 2 weekends, after Lily's casual abandonment and my parents' blind defense of her, I realized I was done bending. It wasn't love keeping me here anymore. It was obligation. I started looking at apartments near my workplace, small places I could afford on my own. I scoured listings late at night, keeping the browser hidden whenever my parents passed by. Every small place I saw felt like a spark of freedom, tiny kitchens, modest living rooms, and the simple joy of knowing I wouldn't hear another tantrum echoing through the hallways every Saturday morning. For the first time in years, I imagined weekends that were mine, completely mine. At work. I started saving money more aggressively, cutting back on every unnecessary expense, all while pretending to my parents that life at home hadn't shifted. It was exhausting, sneaky work, but each dollar saved, each listing I bookmarked, felt like a step closer to breathing again. I told myself that no matter how guilty I felt, my mental health mattered more than anyone else's convenience. A friend noticed my mood shift during one coffee break and asked, "What was going on?" I almost laughed, almost spilled the truth, but instead said lightly, "Just tired, you know?" Their knowing look hit me harder than anything. They didn't need to say it, they understood. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. I could finally choose myself, and the thought felt almost electric, almost dangerous in its clarity. By the end of the week, I had signed a lease on a small, cozy apartment. I had no idea how my parents would react when I finally told them. I only knew one thing for certain. When I moved out, it would no longer be about guilt, duty, or invisible chains. This time, it would be about me. The following weekend, I felt a strange calm as I woke up in my own apartment for the first time. I didn't get a text from Lily, didn't hear the familiar ping demanding I start my duties. I could sleep in, make my own breakfast, breathe without the constant pressure weighing on my chest. But then, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. Lily and her husband are going away this weekend. Can you watch them again? For a moment, I felt that old pull, the reflex to cave, to accept responsibility. But the reflex didn't take hold. I stared at the message, my hand trembling slightly, and typed back simply, "I can't. I have plans." I waited, bracing for the emotional storm I knew was coming. It didn't take long. My phone rang, and my mom's voice cracked immediately. "We can't believe you're being so selfish. After everything you've done for this family." I could hear Lily in the background, probably rolling her eyes, muttering, "This is exactly why we can't rely on him." My dad joined in, his tone low but cutting. "You've abandoned us. We thought we could count on you." I stood there, letting their words wash over me without arguing. For once, I didn't apologize. I didn't explain. I didn't grovel. I just let the silence hang, punctuated by the occasional sigh or frustrated huff from the other end. That night, I finished unpacking the last of my boxes and looked around my apartment. The faint smell of fresh paint mixed with the faint aroma of the dinner I made for myself. For the first time in years, the space felt truly mine. I didn't need anyone's approval to enjoy it. I didn't need to feel guilty for saying no, and yet despite the relief, a tiny pang of unease crept in. I knew this would not be the end of the calls, the texts, or the guilt trips. They were only just beginning to realize I wasn't theirs to control anymore. I could feel the storm gathering, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid to stand in it. By Monday morning, the fallout hit harder than I expected. My phone blew up with calls and texts, my parents pleading, guilt-tripping, and sometimes outright yelling through the messages. "We can't believe you would abandon us like this." One text read. Another, "Lily is overwhelmed, and it's all your fault." I stared at my screen, chest tight, and realized something I hadn't admitted before. They weren't upset about the baby or the weekends. They were upset that I had taken control of my life. Lily wasn't done either. She sent a flurry of texts that made my fingers ache to type back sharp little jabs about how selfish I was, how I had ruined her marriage retreat, how I couldn't be trusted with the family's most precious possession. For a moment, I considered replying, defending myself, explaining every sacrifice I'd made over the years. But I didn't. I let the messages sit unopened. While I took a deep breath, I realized that the anger, the disappointment, the blame, it was all their way of processing the fact that I was no longer under their control. For the first time, I understood that my peace wasn't going to come from their recognition. It would only come from my own choices, my own boundaries. I blocked the texts for a few hours, just to breathe, just to be free of the constant stream of manipulation. I sat by the window of my new apartment, the sun spilling across the floor, feeling a mixture of fear and exhilaration. I had no idea how long this tension would last, or how much they would push, but for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Relief. The silence was strange, almost eerie, but it was mine. No one was calling me to tell me what to do, to guilt me, to remind me that my worth was tied to someone else's convenience. And yet, even as I sipped my coffee and watched the city wake up outside, a small, almost mischievous thought crept in. Let them figure it out now. Let them deal with the chaos they created. A week later, I started hearing stories from relatives and neighbors about the chaos unfolding back at my parents' house. Apparently, without me there, Lily's easy weekends had turned into full-blown disasters. She couldn't get the baby to sleep, meals were burned or forgotten, toys were scattered across every surface, and somehow my parents were running around trying to fix it all. The irony wasn't lost on me for years. I had been the invisible force keeping their lives from spinning completely out of control. And now, without me, the entire system was collapsing. I couldn't help but smile. A little, though it was tinged with guilt. I reminded myself that I wasn't responsible anymore. Every spilled bottle, every tantrum, every missed nap was now someone else's problem. My phone buzzed occasionally with panicked calls from my mom, but I didn't pick up. Lily sent a single text. "Can you come over? We really need your help." I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen, and then set the phone down. Not my circus. Not my monkeys. I spent that weekend walking through the city, finally feeling the weight lift off my shoulders. The fresh air, the distant sounds of traffic, the hum of life outside my apartment. It all felt like liberation. I realized how much I had given up over the years, how much I had sacrificed for a family that took my presence for granted. And yet, watching the chaos unfold from a distance, I felt a strange sense of vindication. My parents, who once guilted me relentlessly, were now experiencing firsthand what life had been like for me all those years. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger toward them. I just felt free. I could let them handle the storm, and I could focus on myself. That evening, I sat by my window, sipping tea, listening to the distant cries that weren't mine to console. And in that moment, I understood something fundamental. Sometimes, the best way to teach someone a lesson is simply to step away and let them face the consequences of the chaos they created. A few weeks later, I heard a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, I found my parents standing there looking exhausted. My mom's eyes were rimmed with red, her hair slightly muss, and my dad looked older somehow, shoulders slumped. They weren't angry, at least not in the way they usually were. Instead, they seemed humbled, like the weight of the past few weekends had finally hit them. My mom asked softly. I stepped aside, letting them into my small apartment. It smelled faintly of coffee and home-cooked meals, a stark contrast to the chaos I imagined in their house. My parents sank into the couch, looking around as if they were seeing me for the first time in years. We didn't realize. My dad started trailing off, clearly struggling to find the right words. My mom took a deep breath. We were wrong to pressure you. We relied on you too much, and we didn't consider your needs. We see now how much you've given, and how little we appreciated it. I didn't interrupt. I let the words settle, feeling a mixture of relief and lingering resentment. Lily wasn't with them, and frankly, I didn't expect her to be. That absence was almost symbolic, a reminder that not everyone in the family would change. But my parents' presence here, their acknowledgement of my sacrifice, felt like a step in the right direction. I realized that I didn't need to forgive them entirely, but I could recognize that they were starting to understand their mistakes. We sat together quietly for a while, the hum of the city outside my window filling the gaps between words. There was no celebration, no dramatic declarations of love or gratitude, just a tentative truce, a moment of understanding. For the first time, I felt that my boundaries were respected and that my freedom wasn't negotiable. As they finally stood to leave, my mom whispered, "We're sorry for everything. We'll do better." I nodded, a quiet smile tugging at my lips. I knew life wouldn't magically be perfect, but for the first time, I could breathe without guilt. And that felt good. For the first time in years, my weekends were truly mine. I woke up on a Saturday morning, brewed my coffee, and sat by the window watching the city wake up. No baby cries, no urgent errands, no guilt-laden messages from my parents, just silence. And it was beautiful. I realized, in that quiet moment, how much I had given away of myself over the years. How much I had sacrificed without asking for anything in return. I spent the day the way I wanted. Taking a long walk through the park, stopping at a cafe I'd never had time for before. The freedom felt intoxicating, a mix of relief, joy, and empowerment. I thought about the chaos back at my parents' house, about Lily struggling with a routine I'd maintained effortlessly for years. A small, almost mischievous smile tugged at my lips. Finally, they were learning what it meant to rely on themselves. Over the following weeks, my parents visited occasionally, but now with respect for my time and boundaries. The guilt trips and pressure were gone. They apologized when they slipped up, and for the first time, I didn't feel compelled to overcompensate. Lily continued to struggle in her own way, but I realized I no longer needed to fix her life or hers alone. I was allowed to live my own. I reflected on the journey, the exhaustion, the frustration, the heartbreak of realizing that loyalty alone wouldn't earn appreciation. It had taken hitting rock bottom to see that the only person responsible for my happiness was me. Walking away hadn't been easy, and the initial guilt had been brutal. But reclaiming my life had been worth every pang of anxiety and every sleepless night. I sat in my apartment, the lights of the city twinkling outside, and felt a sense of calm I hadn't known in years. I'd finally taken care of myself, and that was enough. I smiled, knowing that sometimes the best way to love your family and yourself is to step away. Draw your line and finally breathe.